very much, Jean. Now, Dr. Chizuko Sato.
Thank you very much. I'm Chizuko from ITE Tokyo. And one of the things I forgot to mention when introducing me to this workshop is my specialty is on Africa. So my knowledge about the Philippines or the UAE is very limited. But I learned a lot from the two presentations as well as my co-commentators' discussions, very informative. I think you added a lot actually to the presentation. So I won't be able to add something new, but I'll add a bit more like the first person to kickstart the discussion. So I'm going to pose a few questions to presentators. The governance of migration. I don't know whether the governance of migration can be also, it's a similar term with migration management or managing migration. But I got interested in the issue of migration management about 5 years ago when I started doing research about mass migration together with groups. And at that time, why I got interested in this issue was because in the past it was receiving countries which was actually dictating who to accept and who they don't accept. But obviously sending countries should also benefit from this migration. So in order to do so, there should be some kind of coordination between sending and then receiving countries. As you said, harmonization of interest between these two countries. That's why I thought maybe migration management is very important for the sending countries. But then, if sending country is going to increase its power on controlling the movement of migrants, movement of immigrants, it might actually clash on the interests of migrants themselves, because it might work as like a taxing on migrants. So I'm wondering how to harmonize interests between the government of sending countries or the society of sending countries and the interests of migrants. And that's what the two presenters think about, is harmonizing this issue. So that's one question. And then secondly, in preparing for today's comment, I read one paper written by Professor Tigno. The title is Out of Many One East Asian Labor Migration States and Regional Cooperation. And it was published in 2009. It's one of the chapters in the book edited by you as well. And in this, today's talk was more about a governance of migration at the national level, focusing on the Philippine government. And your presentation articulated clearly that there is not really a coordination within the state level, national government level, in terms of managing or governing migration. But in this paper, you are articulating that actually the multilateral cooperation is very important within the Southeast Asian countries in terms of the framework of ASEAN. But I'm wondering, after hearing your presentation today, if the different actors, stakeholders cannot coordinate, even within the national level, can coordination possible within the different, regional level of ASEAN countries? That's, I understand the importance of coordination, but how possible, how feasible that could be. That's my second question, and then these are my questions to Professor Tigno. And to Professor Khondker's presentation, you talked both about the situation in UAE as a receiving countries, and then the situation of Bangladesh as sending countries. And I was very interested about this Colombo process in harmonizing this interest of, I suppose, interest of different sending countries as well as interest of sending countries and then receiving countries. And then you said that in this process, the governments, NGOs, and academics are part of it, and you propose as a first component, labor should be included. But I was wondering when you talk, is it I'm just asking for the clarification. When you talked about labor, are you talking about sort of a labor representative of receiving countries or a labor representative of sending countries? Because if I look at like a receiving country's side, actually the labor, I mean, it's usually the business who want to get cheap labor from foreign countries, and it's trade unions or labor representative of receiving countries who are against the receiving workers from foreign countries, because they are worried that the wage level might decrease, or there will be a job competition between domestic workers and then domestic meaning the national workers and then foreign workers. So I was wondering what you meant by the labor. That's my first question. And second, and the last one is, you introduced this about 85% drop in the Bangladesh workers at UAE all of a sudden last year. And then you said the reason was because of increase of irregular workers, so the UAE took this measure as a punishment. I guess if I understood correctly. And then you introduced about the government-to-government agreement between Bangladesh and Malaysia, and government-to-government agreement may be able to prevent this kind of sudden drop happening. But so I was wondering whether there is any kind of bilateral agreement between UAE and Bangladesh government, or this sort of sudden refusal from of the UAE government to issue the labor visa was just done unilaterally, and then the Bangladesh government was taken by surprise. I wanted to know more about this relationship between UAE and Bangladesh. That's my second. So 2 questions each. I hope I made it clear.